And we're going to open up the hearing for a blasting plan for 253 Meadowbrook. So who's going to be presenting?
I'll just introduce the presenter, Jonathan White, for the owners of 253. We're here for a meeting pursuant to the order conditions, certificate of action, to update you on blasting. We're essentially set to go. I'll let Ken Smith tell you where we're at and answer any questions. I know you folks can direct where we go to some extent because we've gone into blasting at prior meetings when it was public hearing, and now we're at a meeting and you want to some extent you'll direct this, but Ken can tell you where we're at right now.
Great.
My name is Ken Smith. I'm a technical supervisor for Main Drilling and Blasting, and hopefully I'm here to answer whatever questions haven't been answered. I'll bring you up to date a little bit since last I was here, and I wasn't here for the first meeting, but I've been out to the site today because we have some engineering out there, and we now can really look at what the actual cuts are in the ledge. We can look at the way the layout is. And it looks very close to all of what we had presented earlier. Very, very close. I looked at the location for the test blast. We originally had proposed it to be in a very shallow cut over on the side of the site near the country club.
You're just saying it's a shallow cut. Not like 2 feet down.
That's right. Yes. Very
superficial.
Very superficial, very small, but something that needed to be excavated. That area, indeed, is very little rock over there, but it was so marginal to begin with. It's not far off to be 6 inches or a foot off of what the initial exploration suggested is actually pretty accurate. So we looked at moving the test blast over, again, still a centrally remote location, but more over towards the house itself. And that would be on the clubhouse side, adjacent to the Meadowbrook Road. And that location turns out to be about between 220 and 240 feet away from the 3 closest structures, which are these folks here that are behind and beside, and the country club. And so I looked at the design of the test blast, and based on variables that we might expect to see out there, worst case scenario, we're still going to be at less than 20% of what the safe level is for laid plastic construction. Now, why is that significant? That's the weakest building material that we have out there, but it's also the construction of these older homes. And so that's the entire plan is built around that type of structure, generating levels that are safe for that type of structure. And
Let me back up.
Yeah.
So you're at 20%. So, but you could actually, let's just say, be at 100%. You would still be safe.
That's right,
these structures.
because damage doesn't happen
So
at that safe level. I could show you in here a
So
little
you're
bit.
saying that this is a quarter, almost like, yeah, a fifth really.
One piece of background, they've met with Captain Roberts, who supervises blasting for the fire department, gone over the plans. Once they go for the actual permit, when we're done here, they will formally submit those plans, but they've sat down with them and gone over the plans.
So, the reason you want to start with a conservative design in a remote location is particle velocity is what we're limited to. It's a speed limit. It's how fast the wave moves up and down. That is controlled by the frequency at which it occurs. It turns out that if a wave moves up and down slower, it's more like the type of wave that comes from an earthquake. So our particle velocity, our speed limit is reduced to a lower frequency. And so part of the reason to do a test blast, and there'll be several of them. Every time we move to a new location or change a design, it's a test of that design. So don't read anything overly significant into the first blast. It's the first blast that we're out there. It's a test of our proposed design. We'll be looking at the seismic results from that to be able to design future blasts. We'll take that input and we will design our charge weight and our timing between those charges based on the ground response, the structural response, how we have, where we have our seismic regrets, but also the fragmentation of the rock. It'd be very good if we went out, I suppose, and we blasted and we had no vibration at all, but if they couldn't dig the rock out after we were done, well, that might be important too. So we have to look at the entire design and we fine tune it. And we do that so that when we get closer to those structures, we can maintain still a wide margin between us and that safe level. But that, for those of you that maybe hadn't seen the blast plan, this is what that safe level is. It comes from research done by the Bureau of Mines, and this is that speed limit. When it's above 40 hertz, it's 2 inches per second. You can see it starts to drop down lower and lower. Now, in the state of Massachusetts, we're allowed to use this upper line right here. If you refer to the key right here, it shows this blue line right here is plaster. That's not modern plaster, that's laid plaster, the type of construction we're talking about. So on this one, rather than using the normal state limitation, which is this red line, we're going to use this line. Now, this is the safe level. Where does damage happen? When they did this research, gave 100% margin between the damage level. So they basically do this line halfway between where damage occurs. So basically double these levels is where damage happens. So that's why it's not called the danger level. It's called the safe level. It's pretty easy for anyone to interpret when the seismograph is triggered by a blast event. It will plot all of the data on here as little dots. And the data is measured in 3 mutually opposed directions. We have transverse, radial, and vertical vibrations. So the sensor is measuring all forms of vibration that is received at a structure where we have it located. And the peak, the highest one of those dots, some will be down here, but the highest one all has to be below that line. Your community, your fire department monitors that. All of these reports, along with the blast report, gets turned in, and in order for us to maintain our permit, we have to be compliant. We have to be below that. If we exceeded that safe level, we found for suspension. So it's important to us. It's not like a speeding ticket while you just get a ticket. You lose your permit. You exceeded that level. So if you don't like drive at 70 miles an hour, because we can have 5 miles over the speed limit, we drive down here under that speed limit, because what happens if we're 1 mile an hour over the speed limit? That's it. You lose your permit. And this is probably one of the toughest states to work in, Massachusetts. I work anywhere from northern Maine up to Buffalo, all the way down to the Carolinas. The only other state that even comes close is Pennsylvania. They don't take your permit, they give you monetary fines. Massachusetts, you lose your permit.
So what determines whether the vibration is here or here?
That is frequency. See down the bottom of the frost here?
So what determines frequency?
The harder the material, the higher its natural resident frequency. So good hard rock, like we have in New England, typically puts us up in this range here. When we get in some parts of the country where the rock is a lot softer, like area cold as mine. It gets down lower down here. It is mostly going to be up here. Now, one of our neighbors here has, out of his home, built, and I spent some time to understand what was going on. Out of his home was built on rock, and another portion of his house is built on fill. So they'll respond a little bit differently. So we, in that earlier phase of the work, want to understand just how that home responds. Not because of particle velocity, but because of frequency. Where do we show up on this frequency spectrum? Obviously, we expect it to be up here. If it's not great depths of soil, in other words, the ledge is not too far underneath that, it'll still be up on the higher end. And I don't know exactly how deep that is. I have a suspicion based on how close the rock is everywhere I've seen it that it isn't too far down anywhere up on that hill.
So you're monitoring, you're actually having your monitoring set up, let's say the house is built on a rock and on the hill. I mean, how do you?
Yes, we're gonna. I know the worst case scenario for me is to be as because energy decays to 1/3 of its value for every doubling in the distance, it dies off really fast. So the law says you've got to be worst case scenario at the closest location. We're going to have 4 seismographs, not just one like the law requires in Massachusetts, but 4 of them out there. 3 are going to be at the closest structure, with the 4th one to float to a neighbor who might have a concern. I heard something, I felt something. You know, could you?
Yeah, I think the 4th will be at the Quinn residence.
So will the others
on
be?
The other side of the area.
We have it in the plan up here earlier, the locations. Basically, that we proposed. I don't think the Quinns is in here, but this is our initial plan location. 275 is the country club. And because we were going to work over on the country club side, we were looking at 4 Hidden Road, because by law, 4 would have been the closest that we had done our test on.
Look at me.
No, well, I'm
Or
explaining
hidden.
to the folks. And then, of course, these are the 2 primarily closest residences, 21 Hidden Road and 247, to where the house itself is being built, and that's where the majority of the ledge is.
So Quinn is taking the place of Orchard Road?
That's right.
Quinn's asked at the public hearing, we agreed that we do the seismograph there.
And will there be 2 seismographs, whichever house is on Parkville and Parkland, or will there be one?
If we felt that there was a need to do that, we would, but right now we're really looking for what we believe is the worst case. The worst case would be where the fill is, because for 2 reasons.
Where's the fill? Excuse me, could you define where the fill is?
That's your neighbor's addition was built, as we understand the construction.
Sorry, you
built
just
for
never
fill.
identified.
That's right. That's a reasonable question.
So is Daniel Quinn, so where will they be putting it on our property then? Have you determined that at this point?
You take and locate it at the closest corner of the structure to the blast. So again, we want worst case scenario, because the
And
further.
is it outside or inside?
It's outside. There's a whole set of guidelines that have been put together by the Society of Explosive Engineers that determine how that gets set up. They're also referenced in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations.
And who reads it?
Who reads the seismograph?
Yeah.
The blaster has to read it, and your local fire prevention officer that's out there on the detail is going to take that information, take those reports, and ensure that they're in compliance. That's what he's charged with by mass law.
After the fact,
After
after the blast.
well, you
After the
wouldn't.
test blast.
Right.
You wouldn't have anything to do.
They'll be out for every single blast, and you wouldn't be able to see the data until the blast was performed.
Can I voice a concern? multi-residence, and maybe this isn't up to the purview of the planning board, frankly. Item one is that you guys did a video of our house, and I assume
It's
everybody
more
else
done.
is. No, I'd like to stipulate that you would accept the subsequent video. We hired an independent subcontractor. Several video areas you didn't do, I mean, like the attic, the chimney, and parts of the basement that you guys didn't go into. I don't want to row, I mean, after the fact.
No, it's
Yeah.
better for us,
Yeah.
because
It should
honestly, if I'm hearing that a person at the company that I work for hired did underperformed or missed something, that's not protecting the company he's being hired by.
I think it's a reflection of you, which is what's upsetting me about this whole thing. That you hire a subpar.
I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue with
Well,
it if that's the case.
I'm
But
stating it for the planning board.
But
It's
I
a
will.
subpar
I will also
person.
say that according to mass regulations, the mass regulations actually dictate that he is not to move anything. He's not to look at something that's hidden.
No, this is a chimney in the attic.
Okay, so
A crawl space in the basement, the connection to the septic, the connection to the water pipes coming into our house, something that seems to me, for a company that's as qualified as you are for blasting, should have been routine. Routine.
You're not going to
And
find me
I'm
defending.
dumbfounded. So you are doing the Wetterals, and I have full faith that the Wetterals, should any damage happen to the Garrity's, will make us whole. And I'll state it now. But I'm not very impressed.
But that brings me to my second concern, bluntly, and that is, I'm getting mixed messages, and not from you. The developer who said, if there's any damage, don't worry, Blaster will take care of it. And then in frankly, 30 grand view a little bit. And I think the feeling I walked away with was, if your roof collapses due to our blasting, but it meets state code, you're out of luck. Am I reading that correctly?
No, it's caused by blasting.
Even if you're within the state code, in other words, it's not a question of you just having to meet state code. In this case, you're off the hook of any liability.
You could have a piece of rock on a blasting mat, pop off of a blasting mat, and break a windshield. And every single thing right here would be within code. If it happened from blasting, and the windshield got broken on that site, we're paying for it. You know, if it's related to the blasting.
Okay, well, I mean, in other words, I would be living by the videotape.
Yeah, but how
You
do I
look at
prove
it.
it? So I have to hire a lawyer to sue you to prove that the windshield was broken. I had to hire a lawyer. I mean, here we go. You sent your David Falvey in. We have a video. I paid $30 for it. I don't know why I should have to pay for it. It should have been given to me. Now I've hired somebody else that I think the Wetterals actually should pay for it. Run out of pocket to do it. So it's going to be us versus you to determine damage. And we're going to have to hire a lawyer and pay legal fees to go after you for the windshield, the crack, the whatever. God, I hope it doesn't happen, believe me. But we are speaking, as the Garrity's, from experience. When we blasted to do our garage, maybe we didn't hire the best blaster as you're saying you are, but we put a hole in the pool that was in the Becker's house at the time. So we're speaking from experience. And I don't want to have to go through out-of-pocket costs for a lawsuit to recover damages. And I'm speaking from experience.
No, in that case, just for what it's worth, it cracked the pipes at the base of an indoor pool. And I called the blasters, said it wasn't us. I was like, please. I mean, the pipes happened to break the same day you were blasting. It's just a coincidence.
So I don't know how to get to this. I don't want trouble. I don't want any damage to my house,
This may
believe
be
me.
a question for Jonathan. Do you mind if we should address this?
Well, I can address a couple things. First of all, blasting is a very specific area of the law where there's absolute liabilities because it's inherently dangerous. I think I mentioned once it's the same as dog bites. You don't have to prove that these guys were negligent. As long as their blasting caused damage, they're liable to. But that's number one. But number two, the way these things usually play out, not with blasting, but any damage that someone else causes to your property, is you've got property insurance. Property insurance pays for the damage, and then under subrogation rights, your insurer goes after these guys and collects from them.
But that, Jonathan, I'm trying to avoid, because then also your policy cost goes up.
Not if it's paid by someone else.
I disagree.
Yeah.
They'll take a look at your loss record. They don't care whether they subrogated it or not. You don't ask any, I'm on the board of
But
insurance company.
that's how
the way
it
it
plays.
works.
That's how it plays out. Is your own insurance company pays it.
Well, we'll start, we got a $10,000 deductible.
Well, yeah, you do have the option. You can say, I don't want to deal with my own insurance company. I'll sue them or try to go through the state. But I'm just telling you how that.
That
Well,
costs
what
me
I'm-
money.
Hold on a second. I'm just telling you how it's.
Wait, I'm after, if there is damage that's, assuming that you don't stipulate it's legitimate. Now, the damage in the
Right.
video showed wasn't there before the blasting. Believe me, we're not going to attack the house with a sledgehammer the day you blast.
Right.
And it occurred after the blasting, so for the sake of discussion, it happened on that day, and the likelihood of it being
Right,
coincidence.
that's a difference, because sometimes 2, 3, 4 years after the blasting, someone will see a change in a structure and assume that must be
That's
from the
issue.
blasting.
That's a different issue.
So you hit right at the, and so did Jonathan, at the meat of the issue, which is if it's related to blasting.
Whether or not you meet code, because I've heard in the past,
that's
the guy
right.
said, well, it goes to the fire marshal, it goes to the state. And I'm
No,
thinking,
the fire-
well, I don't care if you do meet code, and
No.
I believe you will.
The process is true, the records, if there is a damage complaint, all of these records that are submitted locally now get a second review by the state fire marshal for code compliance. Has nothing to do with your insurance claim, but I tell you, it makes a blaster want to make sure he's got all his T's crossed and all his I's dotted, because all of his records are going up there for scrutiny, and you know what happens? If they find a code compliance issue, he loses his blast.
No, but I just wanted stated at this meeting that you would accept liability for damage caused by blasting as long as it was reasonably
Timely.
displayed. That's
And
all.
we've had the house inspected, and the cracks are measured, which your guy did not do. He took a video. It's fine. I said, this is ridiculous. There are cracks in our house. We have a 1918 house. There are cracks in our living room, which I will acknowledge. You're all invited to come see. I have not done the house over because I'm waiting for various reasons. He measured them. Our person measured them with a ruler. Your person videotaped a nice picture. I took pictures too. But if that went 1 centimeter, no picture would say the difference. A ruler does. So I want to know, you meet code, you meet the fire department, you meet it all, but that crack, when my home inspector comes back, is 1 millimeter bigger.
I've got a possible suggestion that could help both of us feel more comfortable, because I'm not aware of that. But I tell you, when we get to a structure that has cracks, we're working on projects all over the place that have crack gauges installed. And before and after the blast, take a picture of where that micrometer is. And you yourself can satisfy yourself whether or not it's from the blasting as well as we can. So that could be something we could offer to have, if it's an area that you wouldn't mind having installed. What it is it's a plastic gauge that attaches to either side of the crack. And because I understand what you're saying, to yourself, how do I know that hasn't moved? Well, that's one way we all know it's moved. And the beauty of it is, if it's moving for any other reason, because there was a mechanism that got that crack there to begin with. It probably was from its age and the natural, normal, environmental things that happen. That's why when we do pre-blast surveys, we find those cracks. So while we're there to blast, all of those natural, normal, environmental forces aren't going to be suspended. They'll be there during the blast. Long after we're gone, they'll still be there. But what do we need? We need a mechanism to be able to differentiate whatever that natural mechanism is from the bad guys, the blaster. And one way to do that is for everybody to be able to see it's right where it was before we pushed the button.
But that's the obvious. What upsets me, and I've said it, I've written Joe Layden, what upsets me is 1/3 of our house is a crawl space. You know, you pertain to want to protect us. And your person would not go under the crawl space to videotape the crawl space of our house, which represents 1/3 of the square footage of the house and the closest to the property, the Wetterall's property. So what are we gonna do about that?
So you're worried about a problem with the foundation?
I'm worried about a 1918
Yeah, we are.
house that's plaster walls.
Well,
And I'm being honest, admitting I have a huge crack in the living room, but I don't know about my foundation.
Well, just from a logical standpoint, we talked about what that weakest material is. It's laid on plaster, what you have there. The amount of energy that it would take to do damage even to a brick and mortar or a 18th century foundation is going to be a higher level than what it would take to do damage to your laid plaster. So you could not have damage to that foundation without damaging the plaster, just based on the level that it takes to damage those materials. So, and that's just common sense. It's not high science or anything. If you took up that plaster out in your backyard or the materials that the foundation is made out of and tried to bash it with a hammer, which would break easier. So the canary in the mine is that crack, is that decayed horsehair plaster. If that doesn't move, if that doesn't have a problem from the blasting, then more resilient materials aren't going to have a problem either. Because you can't, they're not independent of one another.
Theoretically, maybe you never know.
Well, that's what the research
vibration for
suggests.
some reason.
You know, I didn't do the research, but that's what the research
Well, it makes
suggests.
sense.
And it does make sense to me. And I haven't seen it proven. I've been doing this 39 years. I've worked very close, much
But
closer.
you've answered the big question, which is, and I just want to be clear on that. If it meets code, your reaction is we are not liable for any damage because we blasted within code.
If there's a causation that's connected to blasting, it's connected to blasting. You know, the idea of the code is to protect us from
It's to
getting in
reduce
that,
that possibility.
you know,
I know that.
get into that territory. But I gave you a couple of examples that you could have damage and be totally compliant with that particular part of the code.
That could be with a subpart house.
But nonetheless, the reason they're so concerned in that regulation with lathe-on plaster is because there are some homes that are
Well,
constructed with it.
should we, the next step, and this is, I'm sorry to take up, because I'm not sure this is a planning board issue, but should we give you that video result of the second contractor we brought in?
It wasn't video.
Well, what did we do?
It was a home inspector.
Okay. The results of that.
Including the crawl space that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So you may,
It's almost like I want to introduce
Your decision
beforehand,
is-
so when there's a row afterwards, we say, look,
But
that's what he found.
What the concept was, it was getting a baseline.
Yeah.
This
As
is
I
the
read
first
it,
thing. And what if?
I want my baseline
the
accepted.
taking photographs, frankly,
He took
is
photographs, John.
your video is really not for your protection, it's for theirs, because if they miss a spot, and you come back and say, here's the new crack, and they look and they don't have a photograph of that wall, they don't have any defense.
But Jonathan,
Oh, yeah, they do.
there's no attic, there was no crawl space. I want them to accept my home inspector.
What they
I
say, come
also
on,
asked
what they
your
say was there in
people
the first
if
place.
they were coming back, because we signed an agreement, and it's supposed to be a 90-day inspection. I don't know anything about that. So I've hired my person to come back. I want my person accepted tonight as the operative person as to whether there's damage in my house. And I want to guarantee that should there be damage, should we file a claim, all expenses will be paid for by the Wetteralls.
The process needs to be that the post-blasting inspection needs to be performed anywhere that someone has a claim of damage. So you might go out and do 4,000 surveys in the neighborhood, and we do sometimes.
But is it gonna be by your person that didn't bother to go up to my attic? How can I trust that? Who's going to do the
But
post
you'd accept
inspection?
ours, would you not?
Yeah, the more information, the better.
But you're willing to accept ours, that's all I
You know,
want.
and I think that's fine if we're, if
I'm not
we get
saying-
better documentation.
Provided you can, and I'm sure you can, provided you can authenticate time and.
That's right, that's all we would want to be
He
He
able to.
took pictures with the camera. It was recommended by Chubb, who's our home insurance person.
The camera that you're referring to, these are photographs, still photographs?
Photographs,
or video?
not a video, photographs.
Right,
With the time, the date,
right, they
whatever.
all,
So you've lost faith in this
Absolutely.
particular subcontractor that you used, and you're asking that we can maybe.
No,
give
I
one-
didn't use them. I
Right,
was
no.
offered their services, which I accepted.
But
But
you've lost
I
faith
found
in that.
it sorely lacking when I didn't know about the attic. The attic came up because the first thing that the home inspector recommended by Chubb said to me, "Where's your attic?" I said, "Why are you asking?" The other guy never asked it. He said, "Your chimney is the highest part of the house. It is bricks and mortar. If there's blasting, you're lucky, Mrs. Garrity, your house is not bricks and mortar because that would go first. It's wood clapboard, that's okay, but the chimney will go first." So he
Well, I'm just trying to get to one thing here, and that's just, so we do have the second inspector.
Yeah.
Would you accept the second inspector as sort of the
There is a
baseline?
problem.
That's the number
Verify.
one thing
Yeah.
that you want to do.
Yeah, the more information, the better, because we actually
So
have.
that we're agreed
well,
on, right?
there's two things. I mean,
Yeah.
first, there's the addendum, in other words, to the inspection.
Yeah.
We're adding this. That's the new baseline.
Right.
I just want them to accept it.
That's
You're being authentic.
Supplemental
Baseline.
and
With
accepted.
authentication,
and-
that's fine.
Okay, so we get that one little thing out of the way. There's some other little
What's
things.
the- And you told us this, and I think it's more than that. What's your notice on each blasting? We have a dog who's extremely sensitive to, weirdly sensitive to loud noises and vibrations. So do you give us a day's notice or 2 hours or?
We try to work with the neighbors to know just what it is that they need. If there's a special circumstances, I believe that it's already dictated
48 hours.
in this project, you know, so,
And the time of day is given in the 48-hour notice?
yeah, the real issue for us is to be able 48 hours ahead to call it right to the minute.
Yeah.
The reason being
That's
is
what we want, yeah.
we cannot set our blast off just like it's a NASA countdown. If we don't have everything right, you know, if we do any kind of a diagnostic check and it's not right, we're not going to blast and just say, oh, we got to shoot anyways. It's not right. We got to know that, you know, it's properly loaded, it tests properly, and it's covered and properly
I'm just
before we
saying-
shoot. So.
I mean, just as a question, this is.
No, so typically what we would do is give that 48-hour notice with a time frame where we expect it. And then the day of the blast, we would call you minutes before or half an hour before or whatever you felt you needed once we've identified that particular
You'd say,
blast event.
we're going to lower the plunger, whatever you boys do at
Yeah,
10:50.
and we actually have, and we encourage it, because the more you folks, we can't blast without folks knowing. We have a call list, and anyone that wants to be on that call list will be on that call list. Typically, they call in a half an hour before, you know, with an accurate time.
Joe's on the call list, isn't he? That guy.
Town plan.
The town planner.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to be. Right now, the list, the job hasn't been approved, so the list hasn't been fully established. But typically, what we're doing is
It's usually the
signing.
fire department, the planner, the
Yeah.
site plan review involved.
Yeah, well, the fire department has to know, you know, and then
Yeah.
local, whatever local authorities
It's got
beyond that.
conditions on it, so presumably he'd be automatic.
Yes.
Also, actually, we have a request from the Harvard Observatory. They want to be notified of any blasting as well, because it shows up on their seismographs.
Huh.
So
You mean the
BC
You mean BC, is that?
Yeah, that's- yes.
Concord
Observatory.
Road?
Yeah.
No, the west.
Yeah, on Concord Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, Weston Road, yeah.
Sudbury, yeah, way out. Well, piece of people.
No, they pick up those blasts in Meadowbrook. They pick those up.
Small earthquake in New
And
Hampshire.
how many
It's just kind of cool.
blasts, how many days, how long a period are we thinking about here?
I looked at the footprint we had today, and based on some quick numbers and calculations that I went, I think if you want to be optimistic, it's 20 blast days. Now, those days aren't necessarily one after another, because this type of year, or this type of time of year, we can't absolutely say that every work day of the week we can bring explosives out on the road. So depending on the weather, we may some days only be able to drill. I would say a more realistic number is probably 25 blast days.
And would this mean like over a 3-month period for gas?
I think it needs to be less than that, my understanding of the time frame.
Because of the Weston Golf Club, correct? The opening of the golf club, which is what, May 1st? I mean, just tell me,
April 15th.
are you talking now to May 1st, now to April 1st, now to April 15th? What are you
I
talking
guess
about?
it all depends on the day that we start. If we go right to it, it's going to be well before that. You know, if there's a prolonged delay before we.
What time are you hoping to be finished by?
25 days, blast days from the date that we start. Throw in a couple of days for bad weather, you know, in those weeks.
Well, so it's close to consecutive days, though.
Yeah, we'll make every effort, but I hate to stand up in front of a group and promise absolutely when I know safety is the priority, and there's just some days a responsible person can't put explosives on a truck and drive it down the
No,
road.
I understand that, but I've been told you want to be finished by the time the Weston Golf Club opens.
I've been told the same
Men's opening
thing.
golf day is April 15th. Is that correct? May I have an answer? Is that correct? Is that the time you've been asked to be finished by? Men's opening golf day at the Weston Golf Club?
You looking at me?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Well, somebody told me
None
that.
of us remembers.
Wayne?
That's what the videotape person told
Somebody
me.
told me that was the time you went. Somebody, oh, come on.
My past experience working around any country club, including the country club, is golf trumps
April 15th.
all things. So I defer to you folks who live there to know what those dates are, but I don't question how golf plays into.
When are you going to start?
I haven't been told that.
Probably when they get their full approval.
Yeah,
I'm assuming you get the
What-
approvals
Yeah.
today.
Let's just say, you know, you get through tonight, your next step is to go get a permit.
Right, we would
Fire
go right to
department.
the local fire
What's the
department, provide
turnaround?
all of the documentation. They're going to look at some of the documentation that we provide, check with the state, make sure that all the licenses, permits, but a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, even down this road. Is that
Yeah,
a
what's the
5-day
turnaround
process
time?
or-
It shouldn't be more than a couple of days, as long as the proper people are there and available to do that.
So
you
in
could
your-
start next week?
That's what I've heard.
Well, yes.
Yeah, if we would be able to, as a, contractor, if we had that permit.
And
So
you've got
how do
the
we-
room ready for them to start next week?
Sure.
Okay.
So how do we make sure?
So in
Question
your
about-
opinion, does a good videotaping of the house include videotaping a walk-up attic and the chimney there?
Right, from my perspective, the more information, the better, but
Well,
so far.
because the videotaper who came to our house did not walk up into our attic or.
And that's because that's the common practice. The individual who actually did the pre-blast surveys does not, he was hired by my company, but we actually have our own pre-blast surveys. Someone made a judgment call to call in an independent contractor, so maybe so they could be thought of as not being the bad guy doing the video. But I say at every one of these meetings, I would rather our own people do it, even if they are
Will
the
you
bad guy.
pay for my
because
out-of-pocket costs then?
I'm a technical person. I would have to let the manager for the division, I will pass that request on,
Thank you.
So there's some things I can say. Money stuff, no, they don't trust me. But technical stuff, I'm here to answer all of those questions. But you answer your question, because
We have it could be a third floor almost. and we
if
walk
there's
up-
damage from there's so many people that don't get surveys, they are entitled to compensation if there's damage from blasting, whether or not there's a survey period. So that having a survey, or even having an inadequate survey, is not grounds for denial of a claim, because you've got a bunch of neighbors around that are going to feel the vibration and could have a concern based on what they feel.
I'm not so sure I believe that, because we had testimony here by our neighbor Debbie Gates, who was not recompensed for damage done by blasting at Meadowbrook School. So,
Which is well beyond the distance, it just happened.
Beyond the distance.
It traveled up a ridge line, a
Oh.
ledge line, if you will, to our house. And they sort of said, this pound sound. We met, and that's why I'm concerned. They said, this met code, you're out of line.
It would have to have meant more than code. It would have had to be proven that it was possible to travel up a vein and be able to do that. That's what it is. It's not a question of code.
That's an expensive, time-consuming, that's what I'm trying to avoid. That's an expensive, time-consuming proposition. If, for example, there was no survey made, I'm sure the first reaction is, well, that existed before we blasted. Well, how the hell did we, without photographs and so forth, how are you going to prove that?
I mean, I wish I was familiar with the circumstances.
Well, I'm reminded, I'm just telling you, I'm reminded of our blaster who said of the swimming pool pipeline, it's not our fault. Which they backed down, there was a battle, and it shouldn't have been.
But that's pretty local. You're talking about an instance where something happened
It was unusual,
locally.
yeah, it was a sewer pipe that snapped for them on the day of the blasting, you know. How do you prove it was blasting? It's a coincidence, it happened to snap that day. A geological study would say that there was a ledge line that ran directly into their house.
But there is, under our whole community,
The blasters
Weston.
actually sue us, and we're talking a $500 repair bill, it just wasn't worth it, but they ended up basically pounding, pun intended, pounding sand on any claim.
Haven't we sort of gone through this one? Because I thought he'd agreed to accept
We
your
did,
guys'.
we did, I think we
Okay.
have, yeah.
So if you have documentation of the way the
well, I
house
think
is.
Dan Quinn is
This is
now.
Dan Quinn was asking, because he doesn't, we do.
We have
How
to,
much
I
did
have
the
size
extra
of it.
photography
How much
cost?
was it?
Well, he's $150 and he's coming back. So $3,000 bucks.
2 hours on site, normal. Okay. He's
Right.
terrified afterwards as well.
It may be, I mean, what I'm hearing, just sitting here for the discussion, is that it may be prudent to make that kind of investment. It's not something you want to do necessarily, but on the other hand, what you'd want to try to avoid, if there was any damage, is the condition where you can't prove that the damage that you're pointing to was created by the blasting.
What was the baseline, in other words?
Yes, what is the baseline? And if it costs $150 or a couple $100 to establish a baseline that gives you comfort, it may be worth
Yeah, you're right,
that
what bugs
investment.
me about that, Al,
Yeah.
is that you're spending $300 because a neighbor wants to build a house.
I know.
And the neighbor hires somebody that's subpar
Well,
to do the job. He said
the
it's a
second was,
subcontractor.
your question was, would that company be willing to help you by paying for the recording that you are asking for to give you the level of comfort? What I heard is that you said you'd be willing to at least talk to the person in your company that could give that answer. You can't give the answer, but you'd be willing to communicate.
Yeah, I would. And
I heard him talk entirely.
Well, I heard something different. I heard him say.
I heard he couldn't
Here's
commit.
the thing. I need to make something clear here, that the standard for a pre-blast survey is not to find every single crack or detail. You can look in all the manuals.
This is not even every single, I'm
Well,
sorry.
I-
This is pretty
Go ahead,
basic.
go ahead and finish.
And so, this individual, I know who he is, his survey, he's been doing this for a long time, and his survey's been, approved by reputable authorities in the past. So what you're telling me, I'm not happy to hear, because I would like, my wife actually was a pre-blast surveyor for the company that I work for, and I know how detailed she is. And I don't like to hear that somebody missed anything. Why? Because it's a protection for me. So from that
But it's
perspective.
not understanding. He was great. He videoed every room in the house. But he did not suggest to go to the attic, which I wouldn't have thought of. Believe me, I'm ignorant about this. But when I'm told the chimney, which is bricks and mortar, is the most vulnerable part of a house, and he didn't go up there. And then when I requested that he go underneath the crawl space, admittedly, horrible thing. I admit it, horrible thing. But that's where the septic comes in, and people have told me where your water comes in and where your septic or sewer, whatever. comes in as the most important part, and he refused to go in there, what kind of person is
Somebody
this?
that's following the state code exactly, because it says in the code, only readily accessible, visible areas need to be documented. So he was following the code. I understand why you want it to be done, but he was exactly following what the state code is, be it right or wrong.
So
That's
I
what it
should be
was.
out of pocket if the blasting at the Warehouses cause damage to my house because you've met all state code. But
I
the
didn't
two
hear
areas.
that. No, that's not what he said. And we're sort of going in circles here. I think it might be useful to sort of get out of this sort of rabbit hole that we're in and sort of move forward in terms of, you know, where we're going to go from here.
He's accepted our survey as a baseline. That's fine by
And
me.
that's a nice thing.
Fine,
Okay?
thank you.
He's open
That's
to
good.
possibility.
So that
Thank
you'll,
you.
no, just logistics. You have your survey. You'll make copies of it so that you keep a copy, and he's got a copy, right?
He's welcome to it.
Okay. And then there's a question.
I have a question.
Excuse me, I'm still
One second.
talking. You guys have a question, the Quins, right? Have a question about what whether or not you need some additional survey done.
To our attic, which is a walk-up, and the chimney, which I guess is a vulnerable
Would it
spot.
be appropriate to have your person go back to their house and do those additional surveys?
I believe that I
Would
could.
that be useful to you?
I believe that I could go back and say, listen, it's a concern, how much problem would it be? If you're happy to let them in, I believe that I could have that happen.
And that could get resolved
Yeah,
in that fashion?
because it's a protection for us. Yes, he is a subcontractor, so we can either tell him, do it, or we'll get somebody else.
Actually, I think you had a question first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
This is my turn? Okay. John Becker, 21 Linden Road. This involves Wayne as well. I'm trying to understand the operation. I understand there's going to be drilling, and then there's going to be a test blast. Maybe 4, something like that, different locations. Then you read the seismograph, something like that.
After every single blast, we read the seismograph.
After every blast.
Every blast,
So for
because-
25 days, those
Yes,
days, whether they're
that's
concurrent or
right.
not, you come and read. Okay. Between the large blasts, are you clearing material?
It all depends if they're gonna need ramps and so forth to get to certain areas as they're blasting.
Well, I was just curious, because don't you start at the top and you go down? Or you start at the bottom and go up?
No, you start at a shallow edge
Yeah.
and work your way into it. And typically, what you want to develop is long lines of relief and spatially distribute that energy, so it's not all pocketed
Right.
together. And that provides the lowest level of vibration. It also provides for Wayne the easiest access to bring the blasting mats in, so that they're all readily within, they weigh 10,000, over 10,000 pounds.
So the answer to my question is you may not have to clear any material in between the blasting.
Right.
So it's a continuous blasting, if you will, or
Right.
anything else.
Right.
So we talked about communication from you to us. How about from us to you? So for instance, in the 10th day, because I mean this is going to be something like that going on for 25 days, how do we notify somebody? Is there a call chain, as we see something? Because if we see something, we can probably do something about it, rather than waiting to the end of this entire process.
We want to know anything that's going on.
Okay, well, that's
on our
something
end.
I'd like to have established as some sort of a call chain.
Yeah, I think the question is, for most of the time of the project, Wayne is absolutely the first contact. I guess the question right here is, if it's a blasting issue, is Wayne still the first contact, or is Maine drilling and blasting?
Well, I need a person to call.
Yeah, it's one,
Yeah, I will be there every day.
So you'll be there every
Well,
day.
I mean, that,
The fire
Fire department and the planner
But I
would be
mean-
certainly to contact individuals.
well, I mean, the main thing, I mean, that's where I think it's important, because, and also I'll just reiterate, because I've been waiting for an opportunity to mention this. Within our decision, we're fairly specific, we're pretty specific as far as what the purpose of this meeting is supposed to be. And one of the things it's supposed to be is providing a copy of a blasting schedule and also a blasting and crushing operation management plan, neither of which have been done. And I think stuff like this, such as contact information, how things get arised, or how the proper way of communicating issues needs to be part of that, so that, yes, it's beneficial for me, but it seems that, you know, the fire department issuing the permit, if there's all of a sudden a problem, that's also a direct line of communication to either, you know, say, wait, we got to halt, we have a problem here. At least documenting in some way so that we're not spending an hour trying to figure out on our own what the best way of working it out should be.
So what you're saying is that when we scheduled the agenda, we were looking for a specific blasting plan that included information. You're saying that you haven't.
No, I haven't gotten any. The only thing that's been provided has been verbal testimony. While very interesting, I don't think this meets the intent of our decision. That condition 2 that was in the decision that we approved back on December 20th.
So we need to get that information.
You have a blasting plan.
No, we have a plan, a hard copy of the plan, but it doesn't address other items that the board had in the decision, such as blasting and crushing operation management. And the main purpose is to ensure that the management of dust and runoff from blasting and rock crushing activities gets addressed.
Well, we can address that. I know we discussed there is going to be no crushing on this. When we had the public hearing, there was some discussion as to whether you're going to be crushing rock on site. I'm informed that's not going to happen.
So you're going to remove all that rock?
It's going to be removed. It'll be much less noisy. Yes, more on the roads, but for anyone who was close to Highland Meadows for that crushing activity, I spoke to a number of neighbors. You don't want crushing.
But Jonathan, you realize this isn't our first rodeo. We've gone through a number of these blasting situations, as have you. And you
No, I
know,
haven't.
oh, you haven't been through one of these blasting situations before?
No.
Any of the projects you've come in with?
No, the closest I came was on Hidden Road.
Well, I mean, it's just that you've come in with so many. It's surprising that you
But,
haven't encountered this yet. But I'm sure that Joe has in the file an example of the kind of submittal that we're looking for. So it's not. This is not arcane information or information that we've never asked for before. So, I mean, my suggestion would be somebody get together with Joe, take a look at what it is we typically require in this kind of a situation, and make this submittal. And then a lot of the questions that we're hearing here at the meeting tonight, I think, get addressed in the plan.
Well, from what I'm hearing on the plan you're talking about, we haven't even, except for when we asked for names, that's not what this meeting has been about at all.
So maybe read again what you require?
Yeah. So and
No,
just,
I'm saying the
You
last
got that?
discussion for the last 45 minutes
Yeah.
had nothing to do with what you say you're
Evidently.
missing. Yeah.
Right, evidently.
That is
So-
tragic.
Yeah. So maybe, so everybody's really clear how that got missed. You all didn't know.
Well, I think there were concerns that had to be addressed.
Right,
yeah,
right.
so, I mean, one of the purposes of this is also to provide a public forum so that these things can be discussed in an open,
Yeah.
environment.
But
And
then we have specifics.
right. We have to bring
And
this
it
back to
turns out that
what our
the
decision
specifics
is.
weren't-
We discussed before tonight, we looked at this and can address what you've got there. You know, the questions you have there is crushing activities, no. So then the question is management of dust and runoff from blasting. He's prepared to address that tonight.
I think one of the main questions is whether the board is accepting verbal testimony or whether we want something in writing that details this.
We
In
typically,
the past,
I mean, we've done this.
it's
at
a
least
1.5 sheet of
times.
paper that says,
Right.
here's what it is.
I don't know what the miscommunication was, Jonathan.
Well,
but
I'd say
somewhere
it
somebody missed
was a lack of communication in the sense that, you know, because this has been contingent once. I haven't heard that you need a written management plan on how dust is going to be handled.
It's in the
Yeah.
decision.
It has to be something that can be referred to. Verbal testimony just isn't good enough for it.
Yeah, prior to our previously scheduled hearing, I had emailed Ken Stevens specifically to make sure that he was going to address this condition. So,
So does that report address any of these things that you're holding?
Well, we don't get involved in any crushing,
That's
so
fine.
crushing operation. But typically, if we're asked to address issues with dust, say from drilling operation, then we would detail the vacuum collection systems that are on the drill rigs and the dust control water devices that are on there. And so typically, if it's going to come from blasting, that's where the dust would come from. So we can provide those specifications for the drill rigs. It's just that I hadn't, that detail hadn't been brought to my attention in order to provide that for you.
What about the blasting plan or schedule?
So, right, I mean, so let me just, for everyone, because I have a decision right here. This is the condition. During construction, should blasting of ledge be required, the applicant shall notify the planning board, have the company who will perform the blasting prepare a proposed blasting and crushing operations management plan, and meet with the planning board to discuss the plan prior to any blasting taking place. Impacted abutters will be provided a copy of the blasting schedule and notified no less than 48 hours in advance of any blasting. The intent of the blasting and crushing operations management plan is to ensure the management of dust and runoff from blasting and rock crushing activities. So maybe crushing isn't happening on site, but the rest of this stuff is.
And I beg to differ with you. When you said that none of this stuff had been discussed this evening, I came late, but at least one of the issues was discussed after I arrived, which was when things are going to happen, how long they're going to take, what's the plan of blasting. I heard quite a bit of conversation about
Frankly, I
that.
thought we were set with that. I thought that was established at the hearing, which was 48-hour notice. But
That's not a plan.
Yeah.
What are you going
That's
to
a
start, what are you
procedure.
going to finish?
Okay.
Right.
Schedule.
That's
How many
typical
times
for
a
us
day do you
to,
blast?
that's typical for us to do. We usually need a starting date to be able to put that together. But typically, it's, on a site like this, it's 3 times a day, somewhere between 2 and 3 times a day, because they're very small charges. We can't blast first thing in the morning because we have to prepare, we have to bring the materials in, and we have to prepare those charges in that. So typically, it happens from a little later in the morning, which is good for folks. And the town has fire department has a limit to how long what we can blast them.
What I'm hearing from the board and from the town planner is that we'll need to have some sort of preliminary report on this.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem. I think we'd have to leave the starting date until somebody
Correct.
tells me. I'd have to.
Blank there, but
leave
then
it.
you can sequence it
Yeah.
after that. Yeah.
Well, question, just to try to satisfy the golf course. What does the board think about, I'm hearing the questions that they want answered. If we can get the board, the schedule, as far as I'm hearing, the schedule, how long it will take, how frequently. I've already got the 48-hour notice.
How are people contacted?
Contact.
And how dust is going to be handled, and we can submit it to the neighbors and very quickly find out, because this is not a meeting. I mean, this is a meeting, not a hearing. We can submit it to the neighbors. If they want another hearing, or another meeting, we can have another meeting, but, if possible, we'd like to get going on blasting, but still have them be in possession, of the information that you're looking for.
But that's not what the condition, I don't know whether I assume you read our decision.
Yeah, you assumed right because we went over it before we came here. And
I assume that if you read the decision, it says that you're going to present the plan to the planning board, and that we're going to review it, and we're going to solicit comments from the abutters.
Well, frankly, and it's my mistake. I've never read this blasting plan. I was told that you folks had the blasting plan, and I thought that was sufficient. I understand now that it's not sufficient.
We have nothing.
Yeah.
No,
No,
the
you
only
do
thing we
have the
have
blasting
is
plan.
this plan that is the blasting survey, which is not a plan. And again, we're not talking about anything that is really overly complicated. Just over the summer, we reviewed the one for 24 Meadowbrook, which was a page a good page, but basically bullet points identifying scheduling, notification, what's happening, the various steps. It's straightforward. It's not a multiple page document. It's basically just laying out what should be expected.
As a butter, now I'm confused.
Yeah, I can send copies to anyone that
One a
wants.
day, and now
We
you say,
don't
and now
know,
you
it's
say.
like 25.
My
It's
understanding,
25
Platzis
days.
was
Oh, he did
presented
that.
as a freshman.
And 3 a day. But I'm confused, do I have any rights as to
It might be
dust?
something we need to.
I mean, I don't understand
That's-
this.
Well, that's why we want to see the operations and
Broad.
management.
It's like,
But do I have
What
any
the
rights
controlling-
to dust? Dust comes over my
Specifics,
trees,
I'm fine with
my
that.
bushes.
Part of the
Why don't you
plan
send
is
him
that
a
this is how
copy?
they're gonna handle
Send
There should be
dust
no dust.
propagation, so.
No
We
dust.
don't, we'll take up the
Sure.
submission.
I can do it if I know what it needs.
For 24 Meadowbrook,
So,
and Wayne tells me he can have it to you by the end of the day
Well,
tomorrow.
somebody could talk to Joe. I mean, I think that English is his first language, and he might be able to communicate what it is we typically look for. I mean, I don't see why that would be a difficult.
No, it sounded like, I thought I just heard that 24 Meadowbrook serves as a good template.
It's a template,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but communication is also helpful. I
this
understand.
is what you do.
So we've got to move on.
But one more thing, I want to make sure that these micrometers get installed in the Gary's, cracks, and any other people who want them installed. And that should be part of your blasting plan, that you explain that you will provide them, who will install them, et cetera, who's going to photograph them before and after, all that kind of stuff.
So we're talking about the measurement devices that you described that would fit within the cracks.
Yeah,
Right.
I think we probably have to
Thank
work
you.
it out with it, each individual neighbor, because obviously it wouldn't be on the outside where we would have access to the size bomb.
They're little plastic micrometers, is what you said?
Yes.
They call it crack gauges. They're made out of plexiglass, and each half is affixed to either side of the crack, and any movement, you can see the process.
So, who's installing them, when are they going to be installed, all the houses they're going to be installed in. Maybe it's the same person that goes around and finishes taking the photos of the chimney and the crawl spaces and all the things that weren't photographed. All of that needs to be.
I'm curious,
in the
is this
management
new
plan.
precedent for this town, having these micrometers put in every crack?
No, but he agreed to do it.
Well, they sounded like standard procedure for it,
Well,
is that correct?
if there's a specification or a heavy concern, I'm all out there to recommend it. I don't think it's a necessity for every crack in every home, but I see in this instance, it has presented a real concern to these folks, and to me, it's a technological measure that could be made in that case.
We're only talking 3 houses, Jonathan. It's not like.
Well, it sounded like it was open-ended, but I just wanted clarification.
But in any
Okay,
case,
it was
it's in your
open-ended.
interest to know what's ahead, what changes
It
there are.
protects us, right?
It protects you,
One
and it
thing we'll
protects.
say on the record for tonight, 4 Hidden Road wants a seismograph, so we'll get one there as well.
Forgive me, you had a question. I'm
That
so
was, I wanted to
Okay.
make sure that we got that in, so thank you.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like this is something we can get to you very quickly. Because, and sorry we didn't get to you this time. I guess the inevitable question is how soon can we get in front of you? It doesn't sound like this final item is significant as far as time.
We're meeting next week. Maybe we could. Do we have any space open on the agenda next week, Joe?
And again, because this isn't a public hearing, we can just sort of try to fit it in towards the end. We're starting at 7:30, and so I just would have to find out when, and people should either contact me for a time or just look on the agenda on the website on Friday. Actually, I don't have your contact information, but I have Garrity's and John's information. So if anyone wants to just email me their contact information, I'll send out the agenda so you all know rather than having to check on the website.
And we'll run through Joe with it.
Yeah, and I have 2 examples already on my computer that I'll email out to you.
Okay.
But the critical thing would be for me, Bill, is a report. I mean, I mistakenly came to the snowstorm to find submission of materials. And there were none. I just naively, I thought I was gonna hear a plan, so.
Well, that's,
In other words,
this
that's-
plan that historically has been submitted has basically ranged from 1 to 2 pages and any other supplemental information. It basically is a timing, what happened, what kind of notice, who contacts are, what happens if there are issues. The other aspect is that there is supposed to be a plan on file with the fire department. Jonathan, I heard say things have been reviewed. So there should be documentation there. But this report, this blasting plan that gentleman just held up, that is not something that is on file with me. And it's beyond the scope of what we typically end up seeing as part of the blasting plan.
I'm sorry, just one simple question, I'm sorry. If I wanted to find out what was gonna happen to dust before coming to the next planning board meeting.
That's what we in our decision asked them to address. And
But
that's what they should be
I
able
can't
to
see it
address.
until I come to the planning board
No,
meeting?
and whatever
No.
we submit, we can
Right.
send a copy.
So again, because this is something of so much concern, I'm sure I'm going to probably very early. If I don't call them, they're going to call me on putting together this document. Anything that I have, I will send out, and I've been trying to send out to all the abutters throughout this project so far. Any information that I get, so that will continue.
Okay.
And this is one of the issues that the board is concerned about, dust and controlling it. I know the neighbors are, and we'll make sure that the document addresses that adequately.
Thank you.
So, well, this is a public meeting, so.
Yeah.
So we can just
We don't have to continue.
open and
this.
close the hearing.
So likely next Tuesday if we have the time.
Yes, I'll figure out a time.
Excellent.
So that's just 1:30.
Yes.